Most men don't admit this, but deep inside, many are quietly waiting for someone to save them. Not from war, not from death, but from themselves. From the silence, from the numbness, from the feeling of being unseen. And that savior is usually imagined as a woman who will finally understand him, complete him, make him whole. It's the oldest illusion in the book. That love, pure, passionate, all-consuming love, will wash away loneliness and restore some ancient emotional paradise. But here's the brutal truth. No woman is coming to rescue you from yourself. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But for too many men, their why becomes a fantasy of connection, a dream that someone will walk into their life, look into their soul, and suddenly everything will make sense. The inner chaos, the drifting, the restlessness, it will all vanish once she arrives. But this mindset is not love. It's emotional dependency dressed as romance. It turns women into solutions, not partners. And it turns men into beggars, waiting for affection like it's oxygen. The truth is, loneliness doesn't end when someone enters your life. It ends when you reclaim who you are in solitude. Masculine solitude versus emotional fantasy. Solitude is not loneliness. It's the ability to sit with yourself without fear. It's the strength to face the silence without reaching for distractions, validation, or another person's body to fill the void. But most modern men confuse the two. They think they're stoic because they're single, detached because they've been ghosted, emotionally disciplined because they've stopped texting back. But underneath that cold exterior is a craving, a deep yearning to be seen, heard, chosen. And this craving is where love turns toxic. Not because love is wrong, but because the man approaching it is already broken. You don't become whole by merging with someone else. You become whole by walking through the desert of yourself without shortcuts. That's why relationships often fail the lonely man. He enters them not with strength, but with hidden hunger. And when the woman doesn't satisfy that emotional starvation, resentment begins. Passive aggression, withdrawal, or desperate clinging. It's not because she's unloving. It's because she wasn't meant to fix the hole you refuse to look into. She's not the cure, you are. Carl Jung believed that the things we seek most from others are often projections of the parts we haven't integrated in ourselves. If you're starving for affection, maybe you've abandoned the part of you that can give it. If you're craving peace, maybe you've been fueling internal war. Love doesn't erase loneliness. It reflects it. If you're broken, you will attract someone who mirrors that fragmentation. If you're emotionally empty, you'll either drain others or be drained. The man who becomes emotionally sovereign first, who doesn't need to be completed, is the only one who can actually love without fear. Because love without fear is rare. It doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, it doesn't fantasize. It sees clearly, and it chooses. Not because it needs, but because it recognizes strength in another. The fantasy must die before you can live. Here's the turning point. You have to kill the fantasy before it kills you. The fantasy that someone out there will finally fix the ache inside you. That once you fall in love, everything will be okay. That once she loves you right, you'll finally feel worthy. It's a lie, and it's time to bury it. You were not born to be saved. You were born to confront the void and come out the other side with clarity, not comfort. This is what separates men who walk through life in emotional chains from those who move with quiet, untouchable strength. Loneliness isn't the enemy. Escaping from it is. Face it, and you'll discover the foundation of your true masculine power. There's a silence most men live with that no one sees. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of starvation. You go about your day, you smile, you work, you grind, you train. But beneath it all, there's a subtle emptiness. Not loud, not obvious, but always there. It's the absence of emotional nourishment. Not because you're weak, not because you need someone to hold your hand, but because for most of your life, you've been trained to suppress. Suppress your need to talk. Suppress your need to be seen. Suppress your inner world, because real men don't need anything. But here's the truth. Even the strongest man has emotional needs, and when those needs are ignored, they mutate. They don't just disappear, they become addictions, obsessions, unconscious desires for validation, sex, control, or chaos. This is how emotional starvation operates. It convinces you you're fine until you're not. Why men break down in relationships. This is why many strong men collapse when they finally get close to someone. Not because they're not masculine, but because for the first time, there's someone standing close enough to feel the ache they've been hiding. So they overgive, or they shut down, or they self-sabotage. Because somewhere deep inside, they don't know how to receive love. They've armored themselves for so long that softness feels like a threat. Carl Jung warned that what we repress doesn't vanish, it forms a shadow. And the more a man denies his emotional self, the more violent that shadow becomes. Not violent in fists, but in apathy, distance, passive resentment, quiet implosion. The man who refuses to feel eventually loses the capacity to connect. And no woman can save a man who has become numb to his own hunger. The pain of pretending you don't care. One of the darkest lies a man tells himself is, "I don't care." It sounds strong, it feels safe, but in truth, it's a mask, a shield to protect a heart that deeply cares and is terrified to admit it. You're not broken because you want connection. You're broken when you pretend you don't and chase counterfeit connections instead. You sleep with women you don't respect. You scroll for hours instead of feeling. You hide behind jokes or ambition or status. Because anything is better than confronting the real question, am I actually okay? And the answer, if you're honest, is probably no. But here's the thing, that's not weakness. That's your call to war. The only way out is through. There is no shortcut, no woman, no success, no pill, no escape will solve this ache. You have to walk through it. You have to sit in the silence and feel everything you've buried, the loneliness, the fear, the rage, the longing. Only then can you start rebuilding from a place of truth. Most men stay stuck because they bypass this step. They chase power without presence. They want respect without inner alignment. And they wonder why they feel empty even when they win. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." If you don't face this starvation now, it will guide your every decision, who you love, who you trust, what you tolerate. You'll build a life around avoidance and call it strength. This is not about feelings, it's about power. Don't mistake this for emotional weakness. This is the foundation of true masculinity. You can't protect what you're afraid to feel. You can't lead others if you're running from yourself. You can't command respect if you don't even respect your own emotional truth. So stop hiding. Stop starving. Turn toward the ache, not away from it, because the man who is no longer afraid of his own pain is the man no one else can manipulate, shame, or break. He becomes untouchable, not by building walls, but by becoming whole. For the lonely man, love is both a promise and a threat. It promises connection, yet exposes every hidden fracture inside him. It invites vulnerability, but also shines a brutal mirror on everything he's tried to control. That's the paradox. You crave her warmth, her softness, her presence. But the moment she gets too close, something inside you flinches. Why? Because deep down, love isn't just affection to the masculine psyche. It's exposure. Women don't just love, they reflect. A feminine woman doesn't just give you love. She reflects your soul back to you, unfiltered, uncensored, and often unwanted. Her intuition sees beyond your surface. She senses your avoidance, your anxiety, your self-doubt, even when you've spent years masking it. That's why, for many men, Intimacy doesn't feel like safety. It feels like threat detection. And when that mirror becomes too clear, they either run, shut down, or try to control the image she sees. But control is fragile. You can't build love on eggshells and ego. Why deep women trigger emotionally starved men. For a man who has spent his life in emotional drought, a woman who offers real intimacy is overwhelming. She doesn't just say, "I love you." She wants to know your inner world. She wants to touch the part of you that you've buried under ambition, detachment, or logic. And that's terrifying, because to let her in, you have to lower the walls you've relied on for survival. You have to admit you need something more than just solitude or sex. You have to admit you care. That kind of nakedness isn't easy, especially when you've been taught to treat feelings like weakness. But the truth is brutal. If you can't let her see you, she can never truly love you. And if you can't receive real love, you'll always settle for substitutes. The masculine defense mechanism, silence and distance. This is why men often pull away right when love gets real. They disappear, get busy, say, "I just need space." It's not always because they've lost interest. It's because the emotional intensity is too much, and they've never been taught how to hold it. Jung would say, the shadow is being triggered, not because the woman is doing something wrong, but because she's activating a part of him he's disowned. She's waking up the boy who was never taught to cry, the teen who was mocked for being too sensitive, the man who equated emotion with failure. She doesn't mean to do it, but love by nature is confrontational. It reveals what you haven't healed, and unless you're prepared to meet that revelation with courage, you'll mistake love for attack and retreat into numbness, the escape into the safe fantasy. Some men, when faced with this pressure, don't run physically, they run psychologically. They retreat into fantasy, idealized women, online validation, emotional shortcuts. Why? Because fantasy doesn't reflect anything. It only obeys. It gives you the illusion of connection without the risk of being seen. But here's the cost. You remain unchallenged. You remain emotionally undeveloped. You never grow into the man love demands you become. And eventually, real women become too much. Not because they are, but because you've built a life where depth is threatening. Masculine strength is not about control. It's about capacity. True masculine power isn't in how much you control her. It's in how much emotional energy you can hold without collapsing. Love is a battlefield, not between you and her, but between you and yourself. Can you stay open when your shadow flares up? Can you stay grounded when she sees your wounds? Can you stay present when she reflects your darkest parts and still choose to love? That's the work. That's the war. And the men who refuse to fight it, they spend their lives cycling through relationships, always wondering why love feels impossible, never realizing that they're the ones avoiding the mirror. There's a difference between being alone and being isolated. One is a conscious choice, a sovereign decision to remove yourself from noise, chaos, and false connection. The other is an unconscious drift, a slow, painful erosion of intimacy where you stop letting people in, not because you want to, but because you don't remember how. And for many men, especially those who've spent years developing strength in solitude, that line becomes dangerously thin. You say, "I'm fine on my own," and maybe you are. But ask yourself, is that pride or is that fear? When solitude becomes a fortress, there's a masculine nobility in solitude. Men like Marcus Aurelius, Schopenhauer, even Jung all praise the value of being alone with one's thoughts. But there's a shadow in that stillness too. Solitude, when extended too far, becomes a fortress, not to protect your peace, but to hide your wounds. You stop reaching out. You stop opening up. You tell yourself, no one will understand me anyway. And soon, your inner world becomes a prison disguised as independence. The cold armor of emotional detachment. Emotional detachment is seductive. It promises control. You don't get hurt, You don't get disappointed. You don't get exposed. But here's the brutal truth. You also don't get loved. Because love, real love, requires risk. And a man who refuses to risk, refuses to feel. He becomes unreadable, untouchable, unreachable. To others, he seems powerful, mysterious. But inside, he's starving. Starving for connection. Starving for someone to really know him, beyond the roles, the logic, the armor. Hyper-intellectualization, the escape for smart, lonely men. Many deep thinkers, especially men, retreat into the mind. They analyze everything. They turn emotions into concepts, feelings into philosophy. And while that creates insight, it can also become an escape. You start thinking about connection instead of experiencing it. You dissect relationships like a surgeon, never actually letting them affect you. Carl Jung warned of this. He said when the thinking function dominates, the feeling function becomes underdeveloped, and the person becomes out of balance, fractured within. It's not intelligence that creates suffering. It's emotional atrophy. You feel everything but express nothing. You crave depth but fear vulnerability. You love in silence, need, and suffer in isolation. The myth of the lone wolf. There's this romanticized image, the lone wolf, strong, silent, untamed. But in reality, wolves are pack animals. A lone wolf in the wild dies young, and so does the man who convinces himself he doesn't need anyone. Masculinity isn't about emotional starvation. It's about emotional mastery. To feel without being controlled by feeling. To connect without losing yourself. To love without becoming dependent. That's the path of the integrated man. But integration requires courage. The courage to admit, I don't want to do life alone forever. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Connection is fire. Don't let it go out. There's a reason fire was sacred in ancient myths. It represents energy, life, communion. In your heart, you carry that fire. But it dims when no one tends to it. When you go months, years, without true emotional exchange, without touch, without eye contact, without shared silence, you start to lose parts of yourself you didn't even know were there. And worse, you forget how to light the fire again. This is why some men lose interest in life, not because they lack purpose, but because they've let the warmth die out. You don't have to choose between power and intimacy. Here's the mistake most men make. They think emotional connection makes them soft, that to be strong, they must be distant, that to be masculine, they must be cold. But the truth? Cold men are not strong. They're just scared. Real strength is presence. It's the man who can feel deeply and still lead, still protect, still walk into the fire of connection without losing his core. That's rare. That's magnetic. That's the kind of man who doesn't just endure loneliness. He transforms it into depth. We've talked about the pain, the illusion, the deep ache that grows in the absence of authentic connection. Now we arrive at a different question. Is love even worth it? If love has become performance, manipulation, dependency, why risk it? If solitude builds strength, discipline, clarity, why open yourself to the chaos of feeling? Here's the answer, straight and raw. Because love, when it's real, is not chaos. It's clarity, a reflection, a crucible, a mirror that shows you not just who you are, but who you could be. Love that doesn't destroy you, but reveals you. There is a kind of love that doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't feed on your need. It doesn't manipulate, test, or drain. Instead, it reveals. It reveals your fears and invites you to face them. It reveals your armor and asks if you still need it. It reveals your greatness, the part of you you've been too afraid to claim. Most men never experience this because they never meet love in their full form. They show up half-present, emotionally guarded, or chasing validation. But the man who walks into love with sovereignty, who doesn't need it yet chooses it, that man becomes unstoppable. Jung's final lesson, the marriage of opposites. Carl Jung spoke of the inner union, the integration of the masculine and the feminine within the psyche. He said true individuation comes when a man no longer rejects his feeling side, nor becomes consumed by it. He meets it, balances it, marries it internally before he ever seeks a woman to do it for him. And that's the path forward. Not chasing love, not fearing love, but being whole and letting love amplify, not complete, your life. That's what mature love is. Not escape, not entertainment, not ego inflation, but evolution. Love with boundaries is love without chains. Let's be clear. The man who understands himself will never again tolerate love that feels like captivity. He won't be manipulated by guilt. He won't be baited by emotional games. He won't chase after someone trying to test his worth. He loves with boundaries. He says, "This is who I am. This is what I will give. But I will not abandon myself for you." And that is rare. Because most people don't know how to love without fusing, without clinging, without control. But the integrated man does. He is warm, but not needy. Empathetic, but not naive. Loving, but never lost. How to love without losing your edge. So how do you carry all of this into your relationships? Simple, but not easy. Stay rooted in your mission. Don't let love become your purpose. Let it fuel your purpose. Maintain solitude within connection. You don't have to share everything to be close. Keep a piece of yourself sacred. Choose clarity over chemistry. If a woman brings chaos, confusion, drama, it's not love, it's addiction. Walk away. Don't perform. Don't prove. You don't need to convince anyone you're worthy. You already are. The final illusion. The biggest illusion modern men fall into? That love will fix their loneliness. But real love doesn't fix anything. It reveals everything. It shows you who you've been hiding from. It brings up your darkness and your light. So if you're not ready to face yourself, you're not ready for love. And that's okay, because once you walk the path of solitude not out of fear, but out of strength, you become a man who doesn't need love to complete him. He brings completion into love. Final thought. You don't have to choose between loneliness and dependency. There is a third path. Radical independence, radical truth, radical love. And if you find that, not only will loneliness lose its sting, but you'll realize that the right kind of love never threatens your freedom. It expands it.